I received a call while my husband was on a business trip, but when I answered, it was his boss on the line. Your husband, Bob, collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. You need to come right away. I could tell even over the phone that his boss was utterly panicked. I coldly responded, sorry, but please tell him not to come home ever again. What? To the shocked boss, I then revealed a shocking truth. My name is Michelle Parker, and I'm 25 years old. I work as a receptionist at a department store. My husband, Nate, is 28. We met 3 years ago through a mutual friend's introduction. Chatting with my upbeat and talkative husband is always a joy, and we clicked instantly. After our third date, we began dating, and we tied the knot after 2 years. Nate works for a small company that sells cute knickknacks. Since there aren't many employees, everyone is close-knit, almost like family. Even before our marriage, I used to join them for company-hosted events like camping trips and barbecues. Thanks to that, our days are always fulfilling. Every day, I'm reminded of how happy I am to have married Nate. But our blissful newlywed life began to crumble bit by bit. The truth was, Nate, even after getting married, seemed to not shake off his bachelor mindset. At first, I thought, well, we just got married. It's natural. But I wanted quality time as a couple. Even when I'd ask him to come home early, Nate would be out drinking with friends every night, making it a habit to come home after midnight. When I suggested saving money for our future, he'd say that he'd spend the money he earned on himself, rarely contributing to even our living expenses, let alone savings. We'd agreed to share household chores before getting married, but that only lasted a short while. Soon, everything fell onto my shoulders. I began to complain more and more, and Nate grew irritated with me. It didn't take long for our arguments to become frequent. Considering we hadn't been married long, I felt this couldn't continue. Desperate, I told Nate that I wanted to start a family. I've always wanted a child, hoping that if we had one, Nate would shake off his bachelor mindset and start helping as a family member. Well, kids are a blessing. So we'll see, he'd reply, his non-committal attitude leaving me disheartened. However, 3 months after sharing my desire for a child, I felt extremely nauseous at work, unable to bear it. Noticing I had missed my period, I took a pregnancy test on a hunch, and it turned out positive. I immediately told Nate, and upon visiting an OB/GYN, I was informed I was 6 weeks pregnant. I was overjoyed, and while Nate was surprised, he expressed his happiness too. From that day on, Nate began coming home early every night, and he started doing the household chores, stepping in for me as I was laid up with morning sickness. I felt a sense of joy, believing our unborn baby had brought us closer and improved our relationship. Time flew by, and before I knew it, a month had passed since finding out, placing me at 10 weeks pregnant. It's typically when morning sickness is at its worst, and I was no exception, feeling physically and mentally drained. I couldn't take maternity leave just yet, so I had to push through my work battling nausea when a coworker at the front desk asked, "Are you pregnant, by any chance?" I had intended to keep my pregnancy a secret until the stable period, so I wondered if I looked that unwell. As I pondered, she shared some delightful news. Apparently, on my day off, she had spotted Nate shopping for baby clothes at a popular children's clothing store. So, my coworker had suspected I was pregnant because of that. Buying baby clothes this early might seem a bit premature, but knowing Nate was excited and looking forward to our child's birth made me so happy that I couldn't help but smile. I wondered if he'd surprise me with them tonight. With that anticipation, I headed home to find Nate looking like he had something to say. When I asked what was up, he said he unexpectedly had a business trip tomorrow with his boss, Mrs. Jennifer. "I'm sorry, especially with your morning sickness being so severe." "It's okay. Do your best on the trip." In the end, there was no sign of him gifting the baby clothes that day. Having gotten my hopes up, I felt a tad disappointed. Perhaps he'll give them to me after the baby's born. I decided not to mention it and acted as if I didn't know. The next day, After seeing Nate off on his business trip and feeling a raise from morning sickness, I headed to a slightly distant supermarket known for their sales. While loading up my cart with sale items at the supermarket, I heard, "Oh, is that you, Mary?" and bumped into Nate's boss and his wife. I remember the boss's wife mentioning during a lunch we once had that they frequently shop here since it's close to their company. "Hello. Are you on a break right now?" "Yeah. I had a lot to buy today. I was worried things might be sold out if I waited till after work." "I've been roped into being the bag carrier," joked the boss. I see. The boss and his wife are so close to each other. I secretly admire them and hope to have a relationship like theirs someday. As I was chatting with the boss's wife about the deals, the boss tilted his head and asked with curiosity, "Doe, aren't you supposed to be on a trip today?" "A trip?" Confused and unsure about what he was talking about, the boss's wife, who works as an administrative assistant at the company, chimed in. "Now that you mention it, wasn't Alex taking a vacation day for a trip today?" "No. I heard my husband is on a business trip today." "Only Emily was supposed to be on the business trip today." "What?" I desperately tried to piece things together in my confused state. The boss and his wife claimed that only the supervisor was on a business trip, but I had heard that both my husband and the supervisor were away on business. The conclusion I drew from this was unthinkable. Unable to stay calm, I told the store clerk I'd check out later, left my shopping cart, and quickly headed outside the supermarket. The boss and his wife accompanied me, and I made sure to put the call on speaker so they could hear, and then dialed my husband. "Hello, what's wrong?" My husband answered, sounding a bit flustered, as if worried something had happened to me. Taking a deep breath, I tried to stay as calm as possible and asked, "Where are you right now?" "Where?" "On the business trip." "You're really on a business trip?" "It's true. Why would I lie about something like that?" "According to my memory, you took PTO today to go on a trip with Jessica." "What, boss?" My husband sounded so shaken over the phone that it was palpable. "I'll ask one more time. Are you really on a business trip?" My voice trembled with anger. "Wasn't today's trip supposed to be just for Emily?" "That's right. Emily asked for my help, so I joined her." "I haven't heard anything about that. Can you put Emily on the phone?" Emily is currently at the supplier's factory, and I'm just waiting at the hotel." "Why are you waiting at the hotel if you're there to help? What you're saying doesn't make any sense." "I'm so sorry." My husband's feeble excuses left both me and the boss couple shaking our heads in disbelief. "Anyway, we'll deal with this when you get back." After the boss said that, I could hear my husband yelling something on the other end, but I hung up without a second thought. I just couldn't bear to hear his voice any longer. Feeling nauseous, I collapsed right there. "Are you okay, Mrs. Thompson?" gently rubbed my back with concern. Unable to respond, I instinctively held my stomach and let out, "Even though I'm expecting?" At that, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson looked shocked, their faces a mix of emotions. Of course, they would typically offer congratulations, but given the circumstances, they seemed unsure of what to say. Mrs. Thompson hesitated before she began to speak. "You see?" The shocking truth she shared left me feeling dizzy. After finishing my shopping, I somehow made it home and immediately began searching for the baby clothes my husband had supposedly bought. I found the baby clothes hidden deep in the closet. Inside, there was a message card. The card read, "Our baby, Amanda and me, will surely be the cutest in the world. Can't wait for the arrival." I couldn't help but crumple it in my hand. This is what Mrs. Thompson had told me. "Amanda isn't married, but she's pregnant, about 5 months along. I hate to suggest it, but you might want to check who the father is." Hearing this, anger and sorrow overwhelmed me, causing my body to tremble. To think he left my side, especially when I'm suffering from morning sickness, lied about a business trip to go on a romantic getaway, and even fathered a child with another woman. Moreover, the boss, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson had told him numerous times that he didn't need to go on that trip due to him and his pregnancy, but he insisted, risking our unborn child just to enjoy a secret trip under the guise of business. I despise him deeply for that. Just then, my phone rang. Seeing my husband as the caller, my blood boiled, wondering what he possibly wanted now. Unable to hold back my anger, I answered, only to find it wasn't my husband but his boss. Is this Mrs. Thompson? Your husband has collapsed and has been rushed to the hospital. You need to come right away. I could tell by the boss's voice, even over the phone, that he was in total panic. While the news of my husband's collapse was a shock, I found no concern within me. Tell him not to bother coming home ever again. Excuse me? I could sense his boss hadn't expected such a response and could hear the anger in his voice. Your husband has collapsed, you know. And let me ask you, if you were struggling with morning sickness, could you worry about a husband who lied about a business trip with his boss to go on a romantic getaway and then collapsed there? What are you talking about? Haven't heard from my husband yet. I know everything. Upon hearing this, the boss started to panic. No, you've got it all wrong. There's no misunderstanding. I've confirmed with the CEO and his wife that he wasn't on a business trip today. But I haven't cheated. If you haven't cheated, then why are you pregnant? Do you expect me to believe the stork brought it? Well, that's when he gets back from his so-called business trip, do a prenatal paternity test. If it turns out it's not my husband's child, I'll apologize. But if it's proven he's the father, I'll be demanding compensation. No way. The boss let out a pained scream. And here I am, wanting to scream myself, dealing with such an infuriating woman. Compensation. Don't you feel sorry for the baby? To my boss, who yelled like a damsel in distress, I restrained my urge to shout back and calmly conveyed my feelings. Of course, I do. Having a cheater for a father and a mistress for a mother? I've decided to leave him, so he's all yours. The child isn't to blame. Reflect on your actions and make amends. Live a life you won't be ashamed to show your child. With that, I hung up the call abruptly. I then crouched down, hugging my stomach, letting the emotions I'd been holding back pour out as tears. But I can't just keep crying. My real battle starts now. I wiped away my tears and stood up, determined to protect the tiny life growing inside me. 2 days later, my husband, who apparently had been hospitalized for some tests, returned. I refused him entry, handing over only essential belongings and signed divorce papers. The reason for his collapse was likely vasovagal syncope, which can occur when experiencing intense stress. Hearing this only fueled my anger further. Why the hell would you be stressed out? Hey, let me in. I just got out of the hospital. How heartless can you be, not letting me into my own house? All I felt was anger towards my husband as he whined and complained. Heartless? From the likes of you. Leaving your pregnant wife with morning sickness to go on a romantic getaway is way worse. But I passed out, you know. That's what you get for your actions. Realizing that arguing further with my husband, who always had a retort, was pointless, I succinctly conveyed my plans. I'm divorcing you. I'll be seeking alimony and child support. And even when the baby's born, I don't intend to let you see them. If you're divorcing, then don't have the baby. I'm not paying child support. His utterly selfish claims were the last straw for me. Are you kidding me? How can you say something so cruel? You were happy when you found out I was pregnant. That was just an act, so I wouldn't be at a disadvantage during the divorce. Deeply disappointed by my husband's words, I threw the baby clothes he'd bought for his boss's child right at his face. Don't you dare show up in front of me or my child ever again. With that, I slammed the door shut and locked it. He was still shouting outside, but I called his parents, my in-laws, to pick him up. I'd already informed my Mill and Phil about everything and secured their consent to divorce. They apologized for their son's actions and promised to support me in any way they could. Once the outside of my house was silent, I finally managed to catch my breath. Later, I was informed by my in-laws that my husband had filed for divorce. I was finally free from that man. I also got support from the company's CEO to have my boss take a prenatal DNA test, which confirmed the child was my husband's. During the divorce mediation, I learned they had been having an affair right after our wedding. He'd always said he was out drinking with friends or going out on weekends. But I was told in mediation that he was always with his boss. Considering this, I demanded $30,000 in damages from my ex-husband and the same amount from the boss. Of course, I also secured a promise from my ex to pay $600 in child support every month. My ex-husband and his boss faced disciplinary action at work for their affair during office hours, receiving a pay cut for 6 months. The boss was even demoted. The CEO told them that since the child was on the way, they should buckle down and work sincerely. However, both found it hard to stay at the company and apparently resigned. With the payment of damages, both of their savings were drained. They now live in a run-down apartment, and I hear my ex works from dawn till dusk without a break. The boss did have the child, but having cheated, it seems her family abandoned her. With no one to rely on for childcare and struggling mentally, she's apparently placed the child in a facility, as the CEO informed me. As for me, the CEO kindly offered me a job at his company. Raising a child on my own, my current job's pay wasn't sufficient. He promised not only maternity and parental leave but also support in raising my child. So, I decided to change jobs. Before I knew it, 10 months had flown by since I learned I was pregnant, and I safely gave birth to a baby boy. When he gets older, I plan to tell him that he doesn't have a father. Raising a child on my own and working will be tough, but as I gently held his tiny body, I pledged to do my best to protect him.